When you're trying to draw from observation, the one skill that brings your drawings to life is shading. Observing shapes of shadows is one of the most desirable skills for artists. There's something magical about seeing three-dimensional forms appear on a sheet of paper. But why do shadows bring our drawings to life? It's funny how normally we don't pay attention to shadows. We look at people and things and immediately recognize them. But shadows are the signs that tell our brain that we're viewing a three-dimensional object. Look at these photos. I adjusted them in Photoshop so every value below a certain level turns black, and every value above that same level turns white. This emphasizes the shadows, so that's all we see. If you focus on small areas, they just appear as abstract shapes. But altogether, the shadows alone tell us what the objects are. Our brains evolved to interpret shadows. Here's an example. When we see a white circle on a medium background, we see it as just a circle. But if we apply a simple gradient from light to dark, we suddenly see it as a sphere, even if we rotate it. But if we rotate it again so it appears the light is coming from above, and then duplicate it and rotate the copy no longer looks like a sphere. It now looks as though it's a concave shape pressed into the background. This goes way back to our evolutionary history. Newborn chicks will peck at a photo of a grain of wheat. But if the photo is turned upside down, they won't, because now it doesn't look like a grain of wheat. It doesn't match where the shadow should be. In 1957, Charles Mooney introduced a test to measure our ability to recognize faces from limited information. The images he used were simplified two-tone pictures of faces, similar to the house in New York City photos I showed earlier. When we see the images upside down, we just see abstract shapes. When we turn them right side up, the faces suddenly appear. But shadows only look right when the other drawing skills have been used as well. Look how wonky these drawings look. I didn't do any measuring beforehand, I just dove right in. I was looking at a charcoal drawing by John Singer Sargent. I applied a background tone of graphite over the whole face area, then lifted out highlights with a kneaded eraser and added darker tones in the shadow areas. I didn't make any preliminary measurements, just tried to take it as far as I could by only focusing on the shapes of shadows. But this skill by itself isn't enough. I made several attempts, but they're all terrible and don't come remotely close to capturing the likeness. You'll notice how each one starts with the face in the center of the paper, which doesn't leave room for the clothing at the bottom. But when I took the source image and drew horizontal and vertical center grid lines, I could see immediately how far off the placement was. Our brains distort what we see based on what we think of as most important. The face is most important, so I subconsciously placed it in the center of the paper. In reality, the face is actually in the upper part of the paper. The mouth is really near the center. The entire length of the head is equal to 1/2 of the vertical distance, just situated down from the top edge slightly. I was surprised at how far off I was. Look at where the collar meets the neck. It's close to the horizontal center line. By putting the head in the center of the paper, that same point was way too low. So I tried again. This time I took a few minutes and sketched in some angles and proportions to get some of the main landmarks. I I need to estimate the center of the paper. And I'm not going to draw a complete grid line across, but I just need to know where that is. And I know that from the top of the paper to the center of it is the height of his head, and if I just move that down a little bit, this will give me that top of the head to the chin. I can see where that's going to fall. I also know that his eyes are located at about a halfway point between the chin and the top of the head. I also had noticed from the center line of the paper, that's about where his mouth is located. And the width of his head is about that 1/2 distance as well. So I'm just looking for the landmarks, corner of the eyes. That distance between the eyes and the chin is actually broken up into thirds. So I'm looking for where the bottom of the nose is. And these aren't the lines of his nostrils. This is his mouth. This is where the bottom of the nose is. I'm looking for some of these outline, where his neck is, the jawline, the hair that's out here. I'm actually drawing this a little wider up at the top. Because the paper being taped down is causing me to see a little bit of a distortion. But that's okay for this drawing. So I'm looking at these angles and proportions. I'm seeing where things line up with other things. These lines are those general shadow shapes, the edge of the shadow. And I can see these three like curved finger or flame kind of shapes up there along his forehead. And I'm looking for where the bottom of his ear lines up with the bottom of his nose. Now I can get some of the general shapes of the hair. Where does the other ear line up? And I'm comparing where his mouth is and how far away that the collar meets his neck in comparison with that. And I'm looking at that angle from one side of the neck to the other to help me pinpoint where the collar joins on the other side. And again, I'm just focusing on the boundaries between the highlights and the shadows. But now I've got enough of the landmarks in place that now when I start to lay down this tone, I can start to sculpt some of the shapes. So the pencil I'm using is made by Cretacolor Monolith. It's a 9B, so it's a solid stick of graphite. So it lets me get really dark tones, but I'm using it very lightly as I put these tones in. And I cover the whole face area. And then I use a paper towel. Just kind of blend all of this first tone together. Now I start looking at those boundaries between light and dark. I'm just trying to block in those darkest shadows that I can see. And this step is also showing how important it is to get those landmarks in place. Once some of the main landmarks have been carefully measured, these shadow areas can be laid down with more confidence. Now once I've laid down this second area of tone over those shadow areas, I take the paper towel and I blend those again. And now this is where I start to lift out using the kneaded eraser. Start lifting out the highlights. Then I take the graphite again and start working on the shadow areas one more time. It's just a gradual building up of tone. Now I'm trying to focus a little bit more on the darkest tones, making sure that they're represented as best I can. I've also noticed that the eye on the right there is a little higher than it should be. And so I'm darkening some of the tone around, trying to lower it a little. And then when I work on the next eye, I'll try to raise it just a little. Try to equal those out. Also, I'm holding the pencil in a very different way than if you're holding it like when you're writing. You've got this fine finger control, but I need most of the movement is happening from the elbow. By holding the pencil in this position, there's not much fine motor control. It's the broad strokes that I'm trying to focus on. And again, I use the paper towel to smooth out some of those tones. That little place where the ear meets the neck needs to be chiseled out a little. And now again, start darkening tones. Now I'm just trying to clarify those areas that need the sharpest contrast to help define the forms. And here I'm just picking out a little highlight in the eyes. Just darkening the areas around the eyes, trying to increase the contrast in those areas. This took 20 minutes to get this far. As it stands, it's not yet a completely accurate likeness, and actually it would be difficult for me to capture his likeness with the way I have the camera and images set up. I have the camera looking straight down, but I'm sitting at an angle. Normally you want to make sure that your image reference and drawing paper are parallel to your face. By taping my paper on the desk, it causes a distortion in the final drawing. But this should be sufficient to help you understand the ideas of observing shadows. The important thing to remember is that shading looks best when it's applied on a drawing whose framework of carefully placed shapes has been rendered with confidently observed angles and proportions. I do want to say, though, that yes, it's true that beautiful work can be created with only lines. Some of my own favorite drawings are lines only. But now with practice, these foundational drawing skills make it easier to see where the shadows belong. Observing shadows is the skill that will bring a lot of satisfaction when you're trying to draw realistically. I've made some other videos that focus on these other skills, observing angles and proportions, and observing edges and negative shapes. If you want a more in-depth look at these drawing skills beyond my own videos and more exercises, I highly recommend the book Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain by Betty Edwards. These ideas aren't exclusive to this book. They've been around for many years, but this book pulls together all these ideas, and it can have a huge impact on your learning to draw. Just to be upfront, this book and author aren't a sponsor. I just wanted to share it with you. I hope this helps you in your drawing practice. Please like the video if you liked it and subscribe so you know when I post new videos. Thanks for watching.